Welcome to CXO, a magical podcast to help you serve better and concoct experiences that are superlative in nature. I'm your host, Supriya Sharma, bringing to you in each episode didactic nuggets so you can get inspired to sprinkle stardust in your company, your home, and the community on the whole. It's my birthday special episode titled Serve Better, Care More, Love Life. And guess what? Who do I have with me today? None other than the world's number one customer service guru, Ron Kaufman himself. Ron is an uplifting service expert, a mind-blowing keynote speaker, a master trainer, New York Times best-selling author, and most importantly, my unofficial mentor who has given me the vision of illuminating the world with magical experiences. Welcome to CXO, Ron.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm absolutely delighted in your progress as a mentee. Keep it up.
Thank you. Okay, Ron, I was reading about your vision, and I learned that you look forward to a world where everyone is empowered and inspired to serve better. So, what service actually means? What is service? Can you enlighten us on that?
Sure. Well, first, let me say that vision, I like the way you changed one of the words. Originally, I'd written that it was where everyone is educated and inspired, and you turned it into empowered and inspired, which is great because education is one form of empowerment, and it's something that really needs to be made available all over the world. I think the point that I'm making there is that service, which is the action that you take that creates value for someone else, it's not taught that way in schools. So young people are learning mathematics and history and reading and algebra, but they don't learn what is it to have a customer? What does it mean to really appreciate what another person wants, needs, hopes for, or is afraid of? What action can you then take that would then be for their benefit? And I'm saying that's not something that should just be learned in the workplace. That's something that should also be brought into the school systems.
Yeah. And what I understand from what you're saying is service is something that is relevant regardless of what profession you are into, whether you're a customer service professional or not, or whether you're simply staying at home and interacting with your family members. Is that correct?
You know, service has gotten a bad rap, and it's understandable because the word serve comes from the Latin root for slave, and that comes from the 9th century when the Slavic people were conquered by the Mongols, and the Slavic people were put into servitude, and that's where the word slave came from. So you've got serve and slave very closely, but that's not what we're talking about today. And yet I meet parents who say things to me like, I don't want my child to be a service person. I say, well, what do you want them to be? Oh, a doctor, a lawyer. And I go, well, let's say they become a doctor. What will they do? Oh, they'll take very important actions. Really? And what will those actions do? Create very important value. And I said, but wait, service is taking action that creates value for someone else or someone you care about. So your doctor, daughter, or son is a service professional. In fact, all of us are.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us more about how developing a service culture wherever we are enables us to care more about the people we are around.
Yeah, a service culture is very important. Many businesses and government agencies and educational institutions, they really do want to do a good job for their customers or for their citizens or for their students. But they sometimes don't recognize that the way we work with and serve each other inside the organization is not only critically important, in some ways it's even more important because that is the engine that you need of internal service in order to provide great external service. So when we talk about building a service culture inside an organization, we want people to recognize that internal service is as or more important than external service and really focusing on doing a better job of taking action that creates value with and for your colleagues.
Yeah, and that's about bursting the myth that customer service or service is only related with our patrons or the people who are buying our products and services. you took us to a very important point that it all starts at home. It starts within the organization, right?
Yes, but I make a distinction here, which is that the customer is the person who is the end customer. In commerce, for example, it's the one who chooses to spend their money with you or with a competitor. In some businesses, like in government agencies, you don't really have a competitive environment. You have more of a captive, but it's still a captive customer. It's the end customer being served. Inside the organization, many people use the phrase internal customer, and I don't like that, because if service is taking action to create value for someone, then both parties inside of an organization could take action to make things better, easier, faster, more convenient for the other party. Look, for example, at finance and sales. Who's the internal customer? No, internal customer is an obsolete phrase. I think what we should refer to is service partners, where both parties can focus on the relationship and say, what can I do that will make it easier and better for you? What can you do that will make it easier and better for me? Let's work together as partners in service inside the organization.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification of that obsolete phrase, what we usually refer to. We still do it. We use the word internal customers for our team members and employees, service partners. Yeah, that sounds cool.
And the problem with internal customer is once somebody hears that they're the internal customer, they can do this. Well, I'm the customer. It's your job to, rather than saying, yeah, but I need to be a good customer, a good communicating customer, a cooperative customer, a creative customer.
Yeah, and that's why you say that partner works better, because then both are accountable for enhancing the experience of one another.
You understand it perfectly.
Okay. Ron, I recently ordered a copy of your New York Times best-selling book, Uplifting Service, and I also got a chance to read a few first chapters of it. I'm so excited to know what ignited you to bring out such a book for all of us to read.
Well, that book is the 15th in the series of books that I've written over the years, and it's the only one that's gone to the New York Times bestseller list. I figured that after 20 years of working in the field, I'd seen and learned and experienced enough to know that the methodology that I'd created, an architecture for building a culture inside an organization, a roadmap for implementation over time, that it actually worked. We had plenty of great case studies in different industries, in different cultures around the world. And so then it was a joy to write that book, not only to bring out the theory and the model and the metaphors and the mechanisms, but actually to have a robust range of case study examples and practices that people could read about as they were learning the methodology inside of the same book.
And what is that one takeaway, one key takeaway, or one key learning from that book that somebody who is not a frontliner, who is not directly interacting with the patrons or the buyers of your products and services can actually take away from that book?
Well, every single chapter of the book actually ends with a little section that says questions for service leaders and then questions for service team members. So no matter where you are in the organization, you could be frontline contact center, you could be the security guard in the parking lot, or you could be chairman of the board. Every single person needs to understand what are these fundamental principles for uplifting service. We didn't learn them in school. I lay them out pretty clearly in the book, but I also show you how you can apply them to create better service performance. Now, there's also the entire architecture for building the service culture. And that's not the same as giving somebody an excellent service experience, but the two of them need to go hand in hand.
Or could we say that one is the precursor of another? Once we have a service culture within the organization, it could lead to service excellence?
Well, that certainly is more likely. In other words, it is possible to have somebody who's a superstar, a hero, the person who goes above and beyond the call of duty and gives great service, even if the service culture is not great. It's possible, but it's not very sustainable. Because what will happen is that person's either going to eventually burn out and give up and say, why should I work so hard? Or they're going to leave and find some other environment where their style is the style that everybody's using and they feel uplifted and encouraged every day.
Okay, cool. So, in the current pandemic struck world where everybody is going through something or the other, professionally or personally, what role do you think can service play in leading a better life, a more peaceful life, a life that cares for one another?
I think you used the key word right there when you said care. When I wrote the book, I actually said service is taking action to create value for someone else. And everybody said, well, that makes sense. And on top of that, I built an entire career over decades and all over the world. But during this era, and for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been studying it quite closely and realized, a higher level definition would be service is taking action to create value for someone you care about. Now, when you use the word care in that context, you can't just leave it hanging. We have to define that too. And so I went on a real research hunt to say, what is the definition of care? So funny. I found philosophers saying, oh, it's notoriously difficult to define. Well, that's not very helpful. And then, of course, the people in the healthcare industry, they care, but in a particular area for physical well-being. So I looked at it, and here's the definition that I've written, is that care is concern and commitment to well-being. Now, let's take a look at that. Let's say you care about your children. You're concerned about them, but not just concerned. You're committed. You're going to take action that actually contributes to their well-being. If you're concerned about your city, your country, your sports team, the planet, then if all you are is concerned, you can go, well, yeah, I care, but you're not committed. When you actually commit, then we can say, okay, now you're concerned and committed to the well-being of something. That's care. What about taking good care? When people say take good care, what they mean is take action that contributes to the well-being. Well, that's service. So service is the action that creates value that contributes to the well-being, and care is concern and commitment to that well-being. These two phenomena are linked this close. In the post-pandemic era like we're in right now, I think the whole issue of concern for people's well-being has been very much heightened and much deepened. And so we're really looking at the whole world and the whole field in our lives in a very fresh and I think uplifting way.
And talking of this reminds me of your experience with your wife in the Straits of Magellan recently, where you talked about how you were inspired to care more for the world, and which is related to what we are facing right now. Just throw some light on that. We want to hear from your own mouth about that.
Well, my wife and I were on a cruise ship off the coast of Chile when the COVID crisis really struck, and Chile closed the borders so that we were not allowed to get off the boat. And there were no cases of COVID on the ship, fortunately, but we couldn't dock. And so the captain turned the ship around and went back through the Straits of Magellan the other way and went to Argentina, but Argentina closed the borders. And then to Uruguay closed the borders. And finally in Brazil, we were allowed to get off the boat in Rio de Janeiro, but only if we immediately went to the airport and flew home. And that's what we did. So, we went from a vacation, and it was really one of the first vacations my wife had taken in decades. And we ended up back in Singapore in a hotel quarantine. And just by luck of the draw, we ended up in the smallest hotel room that you could possibly be in. It was in a Holiday Inn Express. So that's the small version. 2 of us in the same room for 14 days. And there was enough room to take 5 steps. And for the 2 of us, it was like a cocoon. It was actually a fabulous experience. We just went inside. We got really sensitive. We were really gentle with each other. We thought very carefully about what we want to do and who we want to be and what we want to contribute to when we come out. And when we came out of the quarantine back to our home, it's like, our wings began to spread. And now we're really in a new life doing a whole nother kind of work.
Wonderful. Wonderful to hear about it. And I'm totally convinced that service is taking action to create value for someone else or someone you actually care about. And I'm
right.
Yeah. And I'm sure that all our listeners have at least one takeaway, which is this: what is service? Which is taking action to create value for someone else from today's episode. Thank you so much, Ron. It was an absolute honor to have you here.
It's a privilege to be with you and all of your listeners. Anybody who'd like to find out more about me, you can just go to ronkaufman.com. I'll look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to CXO with your host, Supriya.
I hope you enjoyed a dive into the nitty-gritty of customer experience. If you are committed to applying these ideas in the real world, stay tuned with me. Don't forget to check out all the links and resources in the show notes. That's all for this episode, folks. See you next time.